Welcome back to Chess for Sleep. This is the second video for the channel. In our first video, we took a look at Magnus's recent victory over Fabi in the final of the strangely named Freestyle G.O.A.T challenge, which we poked fun at. Today, we're actually going to backtrack a little bit and take a look at Alireza's victory over Magnus in the quarterfinals. In the first game of the match, Alireza with the white pieces defeated Magnus in a nice game. So we're going to go ahead and take a look. So let's go ahead and dive in. So with this chess 960 position, the first thing we can notice is that this kingside configuration is looking kind of normal-ish. You know, we're missing the light square bishop, but you know, we could see a situation where, you know, maybe we get something resembling kind of a standard chess position on the king side. And then over here we see this bishop in the corner, and like our last game we looked at with Magnus and Fabi, we saw the queens in the corner. Here too, you know, players often want to move this b-pawn early and go ahead and give this bishop some scope. So just a couple of considerations to keep in mind here in the opening. So Alireza starts with e4, and again with this kind of normal-ish configuration on the king side with e4, we're starting to wonder, you know, are we going to see something that kind of resembles a normal e4 pawn, you know, an e4 opening? And even more so after, you know, Magnus simply responds with e5. So next, you know, you might wonder, are we going to get knight f3 here and be looking at something, again, resembling maybe a Roy Lopez? But no, we get b4, and again, this idea of opening up the bishop on this diagonal, also giving this rook some scope. And Magnus in turn meets this thrust with his own b5. Again, same ideas. So now knight h3 from Alireza, and you might have been wondering, you know, maybe here, you know, what about the knight to f3? And, you know, for instance, well, here we're attacking e5, so here's a tempo. You know, black would likely respond with d6, and now castle's kingside. So, you know, what's wrong with this position for white? You know, why not something a little more normal looking? Well, here, black actually has f5, and all of a sudden, you know, you don't want to take here and give the center to black, and also black can get knight h6 in and eventually capture here, and black's all of a sudden doing good in the center. You know, development's looking good. Black is just equal in this position, maybe even just slightly better. So f5, and if we just defend, if we just maintain this spot, this e4 pawn, well, now black has knight f6. And here, again, how do you even maintain this e4 pawn anymore? The engine says the best way is actually knight d2, and this jumble of pieces is not looking very good. In fact, this position, again, is about equal. So yeah, knight f3 is actually not really very good at all. Coming back here, because of this f5 pawn break that black has. So, you know, you might ask, again, in this variation, well, why isn't black getting punished? You know, in standard chess, we're often taught as beginners, you know, you don't want to move your f-pawn too early because you're going to get blown off the board. Well, here, black isn't getting blown off the board. For one thing, this queen, which we normally might be concerned, could come in on h5 and hit the king. Well, it's a bishop here, and then, also the queen is covering. So that's one thing. And, this diagonal could also be a threat. But how are you actually getting this, for instance, this bishop out to get on that diagonal? Again, we have to play here just to hold the pawn, and you're just not able to get here and attack the king. So, yeah, knight f3, actually not good at all because f5 is coming eventually. And so instead, Alireza plays h3, and with that idea, he's actually eyeing up the f4 thrust himself for all of the same reasons. And so yeah, knight h3 might look a little strange, but given all of that, given this desire to play f4 and immediately attack black's center, this move makes a ton of sense all of a sudden. So Magnus responds with knight d7, and obviously you don't want to block your d pawn. This knight's going to come to g6. So yeah, we can also see again with this idea of playing f4, black is not able to get out. There's no punishment coming for white. If white goes f4, white can basically play f4 with impunity here. And that's exactly what Alireza does. His next move is f4. And again, we're attacking the center. And again, as we looked at in that other variation, there's no way for black to hold this pawn. So he essentially has to just take here. And white, white could immediately recapture, but there's no way to actually hold this. So Alireza just castles here. And Magnus follows up with knight g6, and that does, support the pawn, but of course white can still want it back. So with knight g6, this does unveil the attack on this pawn, so Alireza responds with d3 here, supporting. And now bishop f6 from Magnus, again offsetting the strong bishop on this diagonal. We also, if black just ignores this diagonal, at a certain time later, maybe this queen comes and there's this battery, aiming at the black king all of a sudden. So Magnus simply rules that out, puts the bishop on the diagonal, and now Alireza has nothing better to do than just trade. So he recaptures with the knight. And now Alireza goes ahead and recaptures on f4. And then Magnus centralizes his queen. So far, again, black seemingly has done, pretty well out of the opening. This is nearly equal. But Alireza has an idea in mind here. There are weaknesses in this position that can be exploited. And Alireza, already has something in mind here. For instance, Alireza, he could go queen d2 here. This knight has to be defended. And this would defend the knight. And it has the potential to keep the queens on the board. But Alireza instead plays queen g3. And his idea is actually to initiate some trades here. So immediately, white is threatening. If we play nothing move, check, and we're winning the queen. So Magnus plays rook e8, defending the queen. And now white, Alireza actually initiates two trades, the knights, and now he takes the queens off. And we get this position. So you might be thinking, and if you didn't know the result of the game, if you were just watching this live, you might be thinking, is Alireza not pushing this hard enough for a win? And the thing is, with all of these trades, with this sequence, getting to this position, Alireza has an idea in mind to put black under pressure. So, if you're looking at this position, trying to figure out a move, you might think, I'm going to get these minor pieces developed. Maybe bring the bishop here where it's not doing anything now. It's, it's reinforcing d5 indirectly, but, it's not a great move necessarily, not a great developing move. The move that had my eye was a4, with the idea simply that if a4, of course the black took, then, we're coming down the file, and otherwise, again, we're just gaining useful space. We're getting ahead here on the queen side. But Alireza finds an even better move here, and it's a move that I think, is very easy to discard for players that, if you're not, a super GM, you might look at a move and just think that it doesn't look good. But, of course, these super strong GMs aren't just thinking about how the move looks aesthetically, they're thinking about what the move can accomplish for them. And with that in mind, Alireza finds the very nice rook b3. And immediately, it's like, this knight doesn't have a lot of squares, that's not ideal. And, this rook is potentially going to be blocking in its own pawns here on the third rank. But this is a very simple idea for white in that his plan is to go rook a3 and simply hit a7. And now black has to figure out how to defend here, because this rook is, of course, not in a position now. This rook can't get over immediately. So black has a decision to make, and what Magnus does, he plays a6. Alireza continues, puts this pressure on, and he forces Magnus to play bishop b7. So, what has Alireza accomplished? This bishop is defending. If you were playing this game, you're playing online, and maybe you see a player play this rook here now, and you stop them, you might be, declaring victory. This was a one-move threat. You have to think deeper than that if you're gonna make it anywhere in chess. Well, no, of course Alireza is thinking about that. And the thing is, there's another pawn weakness to exploit here. So Alireza's next move is simply to pivot again in front of his own pawn and hit c7. And now Magnus has another decision to make about how to defend this pawn. And the computer suggestion here is a move that a lot of humans, again, I think we would want to dismiss it quickly. It's c6, and this bishop is, of course, just totally hemmed in, and it just looks so bad that when you see this on the board, you're thinking, well, gosh, white has now achieved this huge positional advantage, right? Well, the thing is, these pawns are not static. These pawns can move, this pawn can move, this pawn can eventually come to c5. So it's not as bad as it looks, but it's very understandable why Magnus would not have simply wanted to go in for this. So Magnus chooses a move. He chooses knight e8, and he's defending c7, but this move comes with a pretty significant drawback, and it's that the back rank is now, this knight is cluttering up the back rank. This rook can no longer come across to defend, and this rook can't come back to the 8th rank to cut across and defend. So, because of that, again, we're defending, and the bishop is still open, but black has now hindered his ability to defend his queen side. And we see that come into even more clarity with white's next move, which is simply knight b3. And now, this knight is just threatening to come into c5 and hit a6, the bishop on b7 and d7. So, just like that, black, again, where were we just a couple of moves ago? We were here, and you're wondering, is there enough in this position for Alireza to get anywhere? And now we're here. And how is black defending this? So black still has a way to keep this knight from simply, being able to win one of these weaknesses. And what Magnus needed to find here was bishop c8. And the reason bishop c8 is good is now if you play knight c5 here, you can immediately go d6, and this knight can't take. In this situation, the knight would just have to retreat, and now, you're in a bit of a stalemate here, and your pieces are jumbled. So that would have been better for Magnus. Magnus chooses simply to castle, and again, the problem is this rook. While the rook's getting in the game, it can't get over. It can't pivot to the queen side. Again, it's putting this rook in a position to, potentially coordinate with this rook, maybe come down the e-file, but it's not coming to the queen side. So now, when we get knight c5, which is Alireza's move, well, immediately we have to back up to save the bishop and protect d7. But simply rook a3 from Alireza now, and this pawn is gone. There's nothing to be done about saving this pawn. You can move it ahead to undermine the knight, but of course the rook is just taking. So this pawn is now gone, and again, there is no way to save it. So white is going to be up a pawn here. It's not completely fatal. I mean, it should be winning for white in the long run. But of course, there's still plenty of play left in this position. So Magnus knows he's letting this pawn go. So here, we're no longer having to defend c7. So Magnus goes for knight f6. And getting ready, this knight can at least be active. Knowing this knight, while aggressively placed, it's going to have to trade off in order to win this pawn. So that's what happens. Alireza wins the pawn. Magnus trades off his bishop, though, sitting on c8. Rook takes a6. And now, Magnus has to get counterplay. So the immediate d5 is a good move here. Alireza takes on d5, and now knight takes d5. And we see this knight is immediately hitting b4, and this is an important tempo. White has to defend this pawn. And at the same time, this knight is simply threatening this fork. So black already is guaranteeing that he's getting this bishop off. Otherwise we could see a scenario, with pawns on both sides. This bishop gets out, and this could be a very strong piece. We could have a minor piece imbalance that favors white in addition to white's extra pawn. So it's a very important tempo that this knight gets on the b4 pawn. So we get a3 from white to defend, and then black gets this fork in. So white, has to move the rook. He goes rook e1, defending the bishop. And here, of course, the knight can't take yet because the rook is behind it. So black doubles up the rooks. So now, white has a tempo, but of course you can't move the bishop because this pawn is falling. So Alireza plays rook c6, and this rook is now well placed. It's well placed, obviously. We're threatening to win c7. It's also able to defend c2 and potentially come to c5 and hit b5. So c2 is now defended, so this bishop could move. So if Magnus is going to take this bishop, he has to do it now. And he does. And white recaptures. And again, this pawn is hanging, so rook a7. So now this position. So what do we have? Well, obviously we have a double rook in game, and it's 3-2 for black on the king side, and it's 4-2 for white on the queen side. So obviously, white's goal is to get a passer going on the queen side and push it home. On the other hand, it's a double rook endgame, and that means, there are complications that brings that we wouldn't see in just rook on rook. And that's for a couple reasons. One, obviously, if you can get these rooks teaming up on the 7th rank, then black is essentially at least drawing the game. White could, of course, misplay it and get mated or something. And two, these rooks have potential to maybe come in, and, white has to be careful about his defense, being able to get the king out. Or, again, maybe white is getting mated. So having the two rooks, especially when they're coordinating and these rooks are not coordinating at all, there's an extra layer of complication there. Of course, we see mating motifs as important aspects of theoretical rook endgames, rook on rook as well. But here, again, it's more complicated because these two rooks are coordinating and have considerable threats that they can pose to the white king. Again, especially in light of these two rooks not talking at all. So, yeah, first move. So, Alireza protects his 2nd rank. And now, G5 from Magnus. So why G5? Well, of course Magnus wants to use his 3-on-2 majority on the king side. But also, we'll note, again, these rooks have power to kind of keep this king boxed in. And if we can also get these pawns going, these pawns can eventually, pose a threat to the king as well. And if these rooks and these pawns are all coming at the white king, we'll assume Alireza can avoid getting mated in that situation because he's Alireza, but it could be enough to give black a draw. So, important to stay aggressive here. If you're playing for a draw in this situation, it's not a matter of holding tight and making white beat you. You need to play actively and get threats on the white king. That's the best way to draw. Really the only way to draw this particular endgame. So we get h3 from white, and we see that this king now has this cubby hole. But keep in mind that simply having this cubby hole on h2 is not a guarantee that this king is not getting mated, because you could see a scenario with a pawn on f4, and this escape square is not there. So if these rooks are able to infiltrate, this king is still boxed in. This king could get mated if a player, not as strong as Alireza was not careful. So now rook f5, and again we see that this rook is tied down because these rooks are ready to come on the 2nd rank and simply at least draw the game for black. So Magnus is saying, hey, this rook is just sitting here. This rook by itself isn't beating me. So where's white? Where's white's plan to win this game? And, well, white is still, according to the engine, white is still winning here. It's tough because, again, these rooks are not coordinating. Sorry about that. These rooks aren't coordinating, but this is still winning for white. Here, the best move, and this looks dicey, is actually g4. Opening up this king, dislodging this rook. The computer wants rook f3, hitting the pawn. This is tough for a human to play. And now the computer's giving king g2, but it's also giving rook c5 here, where you just give up this pawn, and, the computer's saying, again, white should have enough play here. This pawn is weak, this pawn is weak, and eventually, you're queening out over here, but, the white king is going to have to be careful with no pawns around it, and even cut off from its only pawn that had anywhere near it. But that's not what Alireza went for. He went for d4 here. And d4, maybe that looks like, well, this is an aggressive plan from Alireza. He's, win c7, get this pawn home. And that's true. But this is actually a defensive move here. And it's defensive because it's clearing the third rank, because Alireza wants one of these rooks to be able to pivot on the third rank and provide protection for the king. And we're going to see that immediately here. So we get rook e1 from Magnus, forcing the king to h2. And now rook 5 to f1. Rook f to f1 for Magnus. And all of a sudden, again, this king is tied up. This rook can't really go anywhere. And white can't sit here. White has to be proactive in defending this king. And you might say, well, what is the threat? Because this is not mating. This king is escaping. Well, it's simply a matter of, if white does nothing, black can just move its pawn up the board and box in this king. So let's say c3, just a nothing move. Well, black's already, this is dead drawn now with f5. And if we still do nothing, it now becomes winning for black with g4, because this is already too late for black to escape. And you might say, well, the king isn't boxed in yet. What about king g3? Well, rook e3 check, king h4 takes, and you actually are in worse shape to take back, but your plan is probably, let's keep it equal and take back here. Well, now rook g1, and this king is in fatal trouble here. If again you do nothing, just a nothing move, king h7, and you're getting mated and you can't stop it. If you still do nothing, it's g5, h5, and mate. So this king is in immediate dire trouble. So yeah, we see that these pawns are a very real threat. A very real threat to white if white just does nothing. So going back to the game, this move, this d4 move, again clears up the third rank for a rook to pivot and again help provide some protection. For the king. So the question is, which rook is the rook that's going to be pivoting? And Alireza here, with 11 minutes on the clock, not a lot of time, he spent about 3 minutes and he had to make a decision. And he ultimately played the c rook to c3 with the plans to bring it across. And that move actually is, white is losing his winning edge with that move. So why exactly? Why? It needed to be the d rook. It needed to be rook d3 here. So why is rook d3 so much better? Well, again, we saw what happens if we do nothing here. This f-pawn advance. So bringing a rook to the f-file is going to disrupt black's plan. So with rook d3, well, this rook was already a defender. This rook is attacking c7. Here we're using this rook, which is already relegated to defensive duty. We're using this rook to defend, while this rook is still attacking. So let's say here, what if black again goes with this f-pawn advance? Well, now rook f3, and here, you're going to lose the pawn unless you trade. So here, this rook is attacking and defending, and there's nothing for this rook to do. If you think, well, eye up these pawns, it's just too late. You can defend if you want, and black will win that pawn. But now it's rook c7, and we're getting this rook to c5 and just menacing all these black pawns, and they can't be defended. So, yeah, keeping this rook in place in this attacking position and defending c2 was really the key. So, Alireza plays rook c3, and I guess maybe the moral of the story, if you already have a piece that's a defender, and you can use it to keep defending and not have to, relegate your active piece, your attacking piece, to defensive duty, you're better off sometimes. Maybe Alireza just, again, was feeling so shaky about this king that he just thought, I want to have both these rooks ready in, defensive positions. I'm not sure. I didn't see an interview with Alireza on this one, but this is, this move looks safer, even though he's losing his winning chances here. So here we get f5 from Magnus, and now g3. King g3 is the only move that keeps things from just being dead equal. And the reason for that, if we go f3 here, rook f3, and threatening here, well, now black can trade off. And again, without this pressure on c7, after rook e3, black isn't losing these pawns. Instead, black is, now he's double attacking these two pawns. If we defend rook a3, and now this is drawn. This is equal in pawns, and white has no way forward. This is just absolutely dead drawn. So, king g3, not going for a rook trade, keeping the rooks on the board, keeping this rook at least still attacking for now, letting this king escape himself is absolutely essential for Alireza. And with that, we get to the critical position for Magnus. Magnus needed to find a precise move in this position, and if he does that, this is probably the one, if he makes this, I'm feeling pretty good about Magnus getting a draw here. But he didn't find it. He didn't find the correct move. The correct move here is g6. And with g6, it's for a simple reason. And when I say simple reason, I don't mean, oh, it's so simple, how did Magnus miss it? I mean, it's for one, this move is made with one purpose, and it's to defend f5. So, with this pawn defended, now this rook f2 resource for white, this pawn is defended. So black can keep the rooks on. Black can simply go rook g1 here. And even though these pawns are getting up the board, these pawns can't be attacked. This pawn is safe. From here, let's say, we want to show that this king is out of play and these pawns are overextended, so we play h4. After takes, we say this king, white says, I'm gonna win these pawns. Well, there's a cool resource for black here. Rook e4. White gets so close to winning this, but of course now we get rook g4. And even though this king is saying hi to the black king, well, black is just winning this pawn. And now, c7, of course, can be lost, but, black's going to have his own counterplay against these weak pawns, and this is a total draw. So, coming back, by playing g6, we're actually preventing we're preventing white from getting any kind of play on these pawns. And again, it's really essential that we keep these two rooks on the board, because again, we can't go for a trade as black, because we can't go for a trade like this where these two rooks come off for each other, because then this rook can again capture here, defend here, come back, and then wipe out these pawns. So black can't have that. So Magnus played king h7, and the problem is now Alireza plays rook f2, And this pawn is about to fall. So Magnus has to make a concession to keep this pawn from just dropping. And of course it would drop, and one of these pawns would also drop. So Magnus has to go f4 check. And because of that, we can't go king g4 to win this because, the rook is dropping. So Alireza plays rook f3. But again, this trade can't happen because this is winning. So Magnus's only choice is king g1 or rook g1, keep the pressure on. But now the king can come to g4, and this is totally winning for Alireza now. It's totally winning because there's too much pressure here. There's pressure here, and the second rank is secure now. So Black is out of drawing resources. Magnus, he plays king h6 and defends here, but it's not good enough because here Alireza actually, the computer wants h4 here, with just the idea, of course, of undermining here and then winning, which would have been good. But Alireza also, his move is strong, and it's simply go ahead and win here now. It's simple, and again, defending, coming back, and threatening to win these two. And now it's just too much. We get rook e3 for Magnus, and it's all, at this point there's just nothing for Magnus to do, but at least he's putting some pressure on white on this a3 pawn, but it's not doing anything. The king just comes up to f5, and now this king is the one that has to worry about getting mated over here on the side of the board, and while trying to hold both these pawns, and it's just way too much pressure. We get rook g1 from Black, and we see at least now Black is in a position to oppose. This rook has a plan to potentially come and could checkmate Black in the right circumstance. So rook g1, preparing to defend, preparing to harass this king from the side. But here we get rook c6 check, and this is, it's just totally gone now. Here, instead of rook e1, rook g6 here would have been, g6 was actually the much better try for Magnus here. Here, after king f6, now we could have brought the rooks here, again with the idea of stopping. Here we see that this king can get mated. This idea up and over. Sorry about that. There we go. Up and over would have been strong. But now Black is ready to diffuse that. So the white king would have had to come up here to get shelter himself. It would have been a prophylactic move. Rook e8. Computer wants h4. Rook d8, trying to put pressure. And we see here that there's still a little bit of play for Black. White can defend. Computer wants g takes h4. Computer wants to initiate this trade. We see that there's still going to be some shuffling here, but again, it's 5 on 4. It's 4 on 1 on the queen side, and it's White's going to be able to queen first eventually, so it's winning, but it's obviously more complicated. So Magnus just gets the move order wrong. Essentially, he plays the rook here first, and now the problem is, after rook c6, we can't play g6 because obviously white takes. So that g6 move was really important for Black as a resource. Now, again, if you're not going to lose g5, which would basically be the game anyway, well, Black has to go to h5. And the last move of the game for Alireza is rook g6. And rook g6 obviously it's just game over. We're winning this pawn. We're winning this pawn. Just for example, again, there's nothing to do. Rook e7 to defend here. Obviously, you're taking, and you can just win like that. If the rook comes to defend here, rook g7, threatening to mate this king. The king comes back. Check. J5, and now rook g8. The king has to come back again. And it's just hopeless. Do whatever you want here. Threaten mate one more time, and now just win this pawn. And now it's really, really gone. So yeah, that is the game. Yeah, really, really impressive win from Alireza. Again, going back to these trades here. Again, who would have thought that black would be on the back foot for so long? Magnus did very well just to claw his way back in the double rook endgame, but yeah, just Alireza going toe-to-toe with Magnus. Again, had to win that endgame with rooks on the board. Magnus, of course, the greatest endgame player of all time, as he is referred to himself as, perhaps jokingly, but and Alireza goes toe-to-toe with him and just takes him out. Really impressive stuff from Alireza. So, yeah, thanks again for watching. In the next video, we are going to look at Alireza having to, only needing a draw in the next game to beat Magnus in the quarterfinals. And Magnus has to win on demand with white to advance, or just to send it to a tiebreak. So, yeah, I hope you'll join me for that one. Until then, be well, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.